I'm going to read a small excerpt, the introductory chapter of a book for youth written by Clive Barker. Now, some of you may be cringing, a children's book by Clive Barker. Well, isn't that the guy that wrote The Hellbound Heart? Isn't that the dude responsible for Hellraiser and Pinhead? Oh, yes. Yes, it is. He's also responsible for this book, The Thief of Always, and I love this book. As a matter of fact, I'm reading this book to one of my favorite young people right now. This is where we are in the book. And she is pretty dad-burn cool. She's given me her feedback about what she thinks is going on in the book, and she's not too wrong. So shout out to my little friend Stella. Happy Pride. Thank you for being a part of my life. And I hope you don't mind that I'm going to share a little bit of your story time with Capital Pride. Now, I present to you Chapter 1 of Clive Barker's The Thief of Always. Harvey, half drowned. The great gray beast February had eaten Harvey Swig alive. Here he was, buried in the belly of that smothering month, wondering if he would ever find his way out through the cold coils that lay between here and Easter. He didn't think much of his chances. More than likely, he'd become so bored as the hours crawled by that one day he'd simply forget to breathe. Then maybe people would get to wondering why such a fine young lad had perished in his prime. It would become a celebrated mystery, which wouldn't be solved until some great detective decided to recreate a day in Harvey's life. Then, and only then, would the grim truth be discovered. The detective would first follow Harvey's route to school every morning, trekking through the dismal streets. Then he'd sit at Harvey's desk and listen to the pitiful drone of a history teacher and the science teacher and wonder how the heroic boy had managed to keep his eyes open. And finally, as the wasted day dwindled into a dusk, he would trace the homeward trek, and as he set foot on the step from which he had departed that morning, and people would ask him, as they would, why such a sweet soul as Harvey had died, he would shake his head and say, "It was very simple." "Oh," the curious crowd would say, "do tell." And brushing away a tear, the detective would say, "Harvey Swig was eaten by the great gray beast February." It was a monstrous month, that was for sure. A dire and dreary month. The pleasures of Christmas, both sharp and sweet, were already dimming in Harvey's memory, and the promise of summer was so remote as to be mythical. There'd be spring break, of course, but how far off was that? 5 weeks? 6? Mathematics wasn't his strong point, so he didn't irritate himself trying to attempt and failing to calculate the days. Excuse me. He simply knew that long before the sun came to save him, he would have withered away in the belly of the beast. "You shouldn't waste your time sitting up here," his mom said when she came in and found him watching the raindrops chase each other down the glass of his window. "I've got nothing better to do," Harvey said without looking around. "Well then, you can make yourself useful," his mom said. Harvey shuddered. Useful? That's another word for hard labor. He sprang up, marshaling his excuses. He hadn't done this. He hadn't done that, but it was too late. "You can start by tidying up this room," his mom said, "but Don't sit here wishing the days away, honey. Life's too short. But that's a good boy. And with that, she left him. Muttering to himself, he stared around the room, and it wasn't even untidy. There was one or two games scattered around, a couple of drawers open, a few clothes hanging out, but it looked fine. I am 10, he said to himself. Having no brothers or sisters, he talked to himself a good deal. I mean, it's not like I'm a kid. I don't have to tidy up just because she says so. It's boring. He wasn't just muttering now. He was talking out loud. I want to. And he went to the mirror and he quizzed it. What do I want? The straw-haired, snub-nosed, brown-eyed boy that he saw before him shook his head. I don't know what I want, he said. I just know that I'll die if I don't have some fun. I'll die. As he spoke, the window rattled. A gust of wind blew hard against it, and then a second time, a third. And even though Harvey didn't remember the window being so much as an inch ajar, it was suddenly thrown open. Cold rain spattered his face. Half closing his eyes, he crossed to the window and fumbled to slam it, making sure that the latch was in place this time. The wind had started his lamp moving, and when he turned back, the whole room seemed to be swinging around. One moment, the light was buzzing in his eyes, the next flooding the opposite wall, but in between the blaze and the flood, it lit the middle of the room, and standing there, shaking his hat off in the rain, was a stranger. He looked harmless enough. Well, he was no more than 6 inches taller than Harvey, his frame scrawny, his skin distinctly yellowish in color. He was wearing a fancy suit, a pair of spectacles, and a lavish smile. Who are you? Harvey demanded, wondering how he could get past this intruder to the door. Excuse me. Who are you? Harvey demanded, wondering how he could get past this interloper to the door. Don't be nervous, the man replied, teasing off one of his suede gloves. Taking Harvey's hand, shaking it. My name's Rictus. You are Harvey Swick, aren't you? Yes. I thought for a moment I'd got the wrong house. Harvey couldn't take his eyes off of Rictus's grin. It was wide enough to shame a shark, with 2 perfect rows of gleaming teeth. Rictus took off his spectacles, pulled a handkerchief from one pocket of his waterlogged jacket, then started to mop off the raindrops. Either he or the handkerchief gave off an odor that was far from fragrant. The smell, in truth, was flatulent. You've got questions, I can see, Rictus said to Harvey. Yeah. Ask away, I've got nothing to hide. Well, how did you get in here, for one thing? Well, through the window, of course. It's a long way up from the street. Not if you're flying. Flying? Of course. How else was I going to get around on a foul night like this? It was either that or a rowboat. We short folk got to watch out when it's raining. One wrong step and you're swimming. He peered at Harvey quizzically. Do you swim? In the summer sometimes, Harvey replied, wanting to get back to the business of flying. But Rictus took the conversation in another direction entirely. On nights like this, he said, doesn't it seem like there will never be another summer? Oh, it sure does, says Harvey. You know, I heard you sighing a mile off, and I said to myself, now there's a kid who needs a vacation. He consulted his watch. If you've got the time, that is. The time? For a trip, boy, for a trip. You need adventure, young Swick, somewhere out of this world. How'd you hear me sighing when you were a mile away? Harvey wanted to know. Why should you care? I heard you. That's what matters. Is it magic of some kind? Maybe. Why won't you tell me? Rictus gave Harvey a beady stare. I think you're too inquisitive for your own good. That's why, he said, his smile decaying a little bit. Well, if you don't want help, that's fine. He made a move toward the window. The wind was gushing against the glass, and though eager to come back in and carry its passenger away, wait, Harvey said. For what? I'm sorry, I won't ask any more questions. Rictus halted his hand on the latch. No more questions, hey? I promise, said Harvey. I told you, I'm sorry. So you did, so you did. Rictus peered out at the rain. I know a place where the days are always sunny, and the nights are full of wonders. Can you take me there? We said no questions, boy. We agreed. Yeah, I know, I'm sorry. Being a forgiving sort, I'll forget you spoke, and I'll tell you this. If you want me to inquire on your behalf, I'll see if they've got room for another guest. I'd like that. Now, I'm not guaranteeing anything, Rictus said, opening his latch. I understand. The wind gusted suddenly and blew the window wide. The light began to swing wildly. Watch for me, Rictus yelled above the din of the rain and wind. Harvey started to ask him if he was coming back soon, but he stopped himself just in the nick of time. No questions, boy, Rictus said, and as he spoke, the wind seemed to fill his coat. It rose around him like a black balloon, and he was suddenly swept out over the windowsill. Questions rot your mind, he hollered as he went. Keep your mouth shut, and we'll see what that gets you. And with that, the wind carried him off, the balloon of his coat rising like a black moon against a rainy fog. Oh, my cat has come to see me. And with that, I'll let you go.